Hello and welcome to the Bazaar of Moxology, a video series devoted to the art of eternal magic. If you'd like to support this series, please throw me a subscribe on YouTube and consider supporting me on Patreon as well. On that note, cue the music. Hello and welcome to the Bazaar of Moxology, a YouTube series focusing on eternal magic in all its forms, from legacy to vintage to everything in between. I'm your host, Joe Dyer, and this month we're going to talk about some things that have been happening in the vintage world, some things that have been happening in the legacy world. We're also going to be looking a little bit at a deck in vintage that is called Oath of Druids, which has kind of seen a little bit of resurgence as of late, thanks to the Throne of Eldraine Planeswalker, Oko, Thief of Crowns. This card has seen a lot of play in vintage. In fact, it has made the Oath archetype a lot better in recent months. So we're going to talk about that. We're going to play a couple games with the deck and kind of show off what it can do. And we're also going to talk a little bit about legacy. So let's jump right into kind of what I want to talk about first. And of course, that subject is Eternal Weekend 2019. That was in the beginning of last month, and it was a pretty good event. Things were pretty great. We also got to see Oko show up a lot there as well. The greatest elk, as we so to speak, as in Joe Brennan, the winner of Eternal Weekend 2019 Vintage Championships, swinging with a 3/3 Alpha Black Lotus elk on coverage. So that was pretty cool. I didn't get to show myself. I was also completely wrong in my predictions for the Eternal Weekend Top 8 from my episode with Greg Hughes, ZS. So just a little bit wrong, but you know, I think nobody really expected the Rug Planeswalkers deck to do as well as it did, but it did do very well, and I was very happy to see that. It's a pretty cool deck. However, this event did give us a lot of data in regards to what needed to happen with Vintage going forward, and of course, the big news in that regards is that we did have a set of restrictions, and one restriction, in fact, to the vintage ban and restricted list. And of course, that card happened to be our good friend Narset Part of Reveals. So this is a restriction I'm pretty happy about. Narset is really just kind of an awkward card. It does not really help the format at all, just even being in the format, unfortunately. And I think it's just one of those cards that it really just needed to go. And of course, you know, we're still going to see it around. You know, there's still decks that are going to be playing it, you know, because, you know, why wouldn't you play this asymmetrical dig through time / you know, Leovold effect, you know, that's really good, at least as a one of. But there were decks that were playing 4 of these cards. Oath of Druids was playing 4. There's a lot of decks like Grixis Steve Shell that was playing all 4 and trying to capitalize it with cards like Time Twister and Wheel of Fortune and that sort of thing. And it just, I really dislike these asymmetrical effects like this. I do think it's pretty obnoxious that this card exists in the first place. But I'm also not too happy with Planeswalker design in 2019, unfortunately, because, you know, we got War of the Spark, you know, we got Modern Horizons, as we'll talk about for Legacy, you know, with Wrenn and Six. You know, now we have Oko, Thief of Crowns, which is very clearly a problematic card in a lot of other formats. Still not really sure how problematic the card is going to be in Vintage and Legacy yet. Right now, it seems like the card is actually pretty decent in Legacy, where it's not restrictable, just strong Planeswalker. But yeah, it's just one of those things. I'm kind of glad they did take the action to restrict Narset. I think Eternal Weekend showed that there was a lot of Narset in the room. As if you read my article on the wrap up of Eternal Weekend 2019, I did note that there were at least 423 copies of Narset across all 300 and something players of Eternal Weekend Vintage Championships. It's a lot of Narsets. It's just a lot of this card floating around. So, and that in itself doesn't make it restrictable. I think it was more or less the fact that it just makes these games not very fun. And it pretty much boils down to, if you're playing a blue deck in Vintage, you pretty much had to play this card unless you were playing like DPS. Whereas, like, you don't have room for all that stuff because you're playing black rituals and black discard and, like, all that kind of stuff. So you don't really have room for, like, 2 to 3 Narsets, as opposed to, Paradox Glaucom has to play 2 to 3 Narsets because they have to be able to beat the mirror, which, Narset's really good against, but they also have to be able to, beat the other blue decks because, if they're shutting them off on draws, then it's really good for them. So the gameplay that Narset kind of incentivized made things not so much fun, in my opinion. It really devolved to either these really weird non-games where you did nothing, or your opponent, or it devolved into this like really weird like sub-game where you kind of just like both tried to see who resolved their Narset first, and whoever resolved their Narset first usually wins, but sometimes not. It also kind of reinforced after the mental misstep restriction that Pyroblast saw a lot more play. And I don't think that's going to change. In fact, already it's shown so far that it's not changing. That Pyroblast is still going to be a very, very good card going forward, because it kills Oko, it counters Oko. But the other card that people are going to pick up on, that I feel like is going to be something that's going to come around more in Vintage now, is going to be Veil of Summer. Because 1 mana Cryptic Command basically is how people have described this card, and it's pretty insane. I don't foresee this card going away anytime soon, and I doubt it will ever get restricted because it's just a card. It's just a 1 mana cantrip / counterspell, basically. But I don't think that's too strong for Vintage per se. But it's pretty gross. So I mean, the awkward part is that Pyroblast sometimes has to be resolved against Oko when he's in play, as opposed to when he's on the stack, just simply because Veil of Summer can counter Pyroblast by virtue of making all your spells uncounterable. And so that's a really, really strong effect. So I don't know. I think those cards will definitely see more play. I think Pyroblast is still going to see a lot of play. This card's pretty amazing. We'll probably see some minor resurgence of Jeskai. I know we've seen a couple of decks already playing with Jeskai, playing those cards like Pyroblast and Dreadhorde Arcanist and that sort of thing. But Dreadhorde Arcanist feels really, really bad in the face of Oko. It's really hard to resolve Dreadhorde Arcanist when your opponent has a way to just shut it off. And that's really, really awkward. So we'll see how it goes, but I have a feeling that Bug mid-range is probably going to come back in some major force and kind of be like the deck to kind of want to look at. But I also think that like PO is really big, gets a real big boost from this, obviously. PO is one of those decks that's kind of just always kind of evolved and changed, and so I think it's going to get a lot of, boost from not having this effect, as prevalent in the format anymore. But there's still a lot of hate for PO. There's still things like Collector Roof. There's still things like Lavinia, Teferi, Time Raveler. Those kinds of cards. Force Vigor even. Are really, really good, strong cards against PO. So I have a feeling that like PO is probably pretty good, but it's probably got a lot of hate directed at it, which might keep it in its place in the format. So we'll see. It's going to be interesting to keep an eye on the format. It's going to be interesting to keep an eye on what's going on with it. So, I'm excited for this next couple of weeks, this next month of Vintage. We'll come back next month, obviously, and talk about this some more and see if we're happy with where Vintage is right now, and see if we're okay with this format. The one thing I'm really I'm hopeful to see is hopeful to see maybe if we see more of these fast pod shells do well again. I know the first challenge weekend we had the Eric's Crab Shack deck do pretty well and made top 8 of that event. So I think that deck is still pretty good. I think if people are kind of aware of it now, so like it's like one good thing and that's it. So it's very kind of not glass cannony, but it does like pretty linear games, which can be pretty easy to fight if you know what you're looking for. But I think it's a good deck. I think it's a lot of fun. I also think that ZS Bond probably has a chance to come back as well. Is also probably a lot of fun. So that's a little bit about Vintage. We're going to talk a little bit about Legacy. If you haven't heard the news yet, Legacy, as far as regards to myself, I'm going to be taking over the This Week in Legacy column on MTG Goldfish, in addition to the current work I do with Vintage 101. So that's going to be good. I'm going to have a lot of fun with that. But Wizards saw fit in the same day that they restricted Narset to also issue a banning in Legacy. And of course, that banning was for Wrenn and Six. So Wrenn and Six has been not so great for Legacy as a format, unfortunately. It's a very strong card. What was really happening is it basically shoehorned Rug Delver into basically being the best deck in the format. I know that in the banning paragraphs, that when they talk about why they banned this card, they both talked about how Rug Delver had 3 times as many trophies on Magic Online as the rest of the decks, had somewhere like a 56% win rate, and had an insane matchup against like the next 10 best decks in the format. And so what's happening there is that, Wrenn and Six allows you to set up, things like Wasteland Lock on your opponent. Also, allows you to set up, being able to brainstorm like pretty much every turn and like have fetches, up to brainstorm and do all that stuff. But it also does a lot of damage to like 1 toughness creatures, things like Thalia, Guardian Thread, pretty hard to force through, Wrenn and Six. Mother of Runes, really hard to force through Wrenn and Six. So Wizards finally decided to issue a ban on this card, and I think this is a really smart ban. They didn't waste any time on this as far as, Modern Horizons only been around for like 3 months or so. Generally, they don't move that fast on Legacy bans, and I think this was a good one to move fast on. I think if we'd have waited a year with this card instead of banning it now, I think it would have been pretty egregious. It would have gone at some point, not if it hadn't gone in November, but it should have. It was definitely needed to go. I think the thing about the card is that it just really, really, really homogenized the format. It did a lot of the similar things that Deathrite Shaman did, where it enforced decks that color doesn't really totally matter, but it also enforced decks that are pure blue soup, Delver style decks. And of course, the Delver style decks became really good because they kind of became a mid-range deck with Planeswalkers, and so you could resolve Delver Secrets on 1, and then you could resolve Wrenn and Six, and then you could start wastelanding your opponent out while resolving these incredibly backbreaking other Planeswalkers like Oko, Thief of Crowns. So that's an important thing, and it also enforced a lot of other decks to play things like Arkham's Astrolabe and play a lot of basics, and so that's a different story. So now that Wrenn and Six is gone, I think the biggest contender for goodness is going to be Oko. I think Oko is just extremely powerful, and I think it's going to be really good in the format. So far, we've already kind of seen that already with guys like Anorak Daz playing Miracles with Splashing Green for Oko, but also Splashing Green for Veil of Summer again. So Veil of Summer is again going to be a card that I think is going to be very good in Legacy going forward. It's just going to be everywhere, I have a feeling. And I think people are going to be really kind of upset with it because it's just how good it is against blue decks, but it's also really, really good in combo decks. Well, the biggest thing is Storm. Storm is playing this card on the sideboard, and it's not only is it good against Storm, but it's good in Storm. And I think it's better in Storm than it is better against it. And that's simply because this card can just they can fire it off, and if the player goes, oh, I guess I don't want to. Do I want to counter this? But the problem is if you don't counter it, then the shields are down. The rest of their spells that turn are not getting countered. Or they fire it off as bait, and if it gets countered, then they can go, okay, now I can start trying to go off because maybe they spent their only counter spell, or maybe I duress them now, and I see that I take another counter spell, and now I start to go off. So it's going to be interesting to keep a track of this format going forward. I think the biggest thing to think of is that we've got a whole nother year of printings ahead of us. So for both Legacy and Vintage, I think things are not going to be the same as they have been a couple of years ago, 2017, 2018, not really going to be a ton of stuff that's going to impact the sets as far as, from those sets, not a whole lot of stuff really impacted, these formats other than, things like Foundry Inspector and Walking Ballista. There were a few cards, but they didn't really shake up the format the way that cards like, Wrenn and Six and Modern Horizons and War of the Spark have. And I think, there was a recent article from Play Design about, when they banned Oko, about how, they kind of, caught Oko, they missed Oko, but how they intentionally, are powering up these standard sets for, standard. But the unintended consequence of that is that these cards are going to have greater effect on formats like Modern and Legacy and Vintage and even Pioneer. That's now a thing now. So I have a feeling that we're gonna be in for more sets like this. More sets that have more cards like Karn the Great Creator, more sets that have cards like Narset, Part of Her Veils, more sets that have things like Mystic Forge, stuff like that that's going to end up needing to get restricted. It's unfortunate, but I feel like that's going to be the biggest unintended consequence of Wizards powering up these standard sets. So it's going to be interesting to keep an eye on things and where it goes and how we adjust to it, especially for the Legacy standpoint. How long does Wizards wait, to ban something? Well, now we know that, they'll ban something from a new set that's, obviously breaking the format within 3 months. And I think it's a good thing. I think they did a good thing in getting the card banned because, we waited, a long time with Top, Sensei's Divining Top. And I personally still never agreed with Sensei's Divining Top as a ban, but it's not, gonna ever happen. You never come off the ban list now. But I think at the time, I still think either Counterbalance or Terminus was probably correct. But we had Deathrite Shaman for at least a year, before they said, okay, look, the format's starting to get really stale and stagnant. Let's do something about that, and let's ban, Gitaxian Probe, let's ban, Deathrite Shaman. Well, with Wrenn and Six, I think the biggest thing about that is that these cards are now just more available online, and a lot more people are playing online. I think services like Magic Online. And these things are getting figured out much faster now in 2019. And I think that's the biggest issue is that, people are figuring things out so much quicker. And it's getting to the point where, you just have to, wonder, they get so much data out of this, that's how they ban, things. So, you can't wait that long, because you wait that long, the format could be just legitimately dead. Like, nobody would be playing it. I know a lot of people, stopped playing Legacy because they were tired of Wrenn and Six. I have a feeling that, yes, people complain. Everybody's going to complain about something. But it's good to keep an eye on this format and kind of go forward with it and see what happens. So in talking more about our good friend Oko, we are going to be talking about some Oath of Druids decks, and so that is an interesting deck list. Bring that up here. So the Oath of Druids deck list, as it stands now, my list is a little bit different than this now, but because I threw in a third Oko and a Jace the Mind Sculptor. But really, the biggest addition to the deck is obviously Oko, Thief of Crowns. That's a big card, that is a huge deal in the deck. So, and then, of course, there's these new additions to the deck, such as cards like Niv Mizzet Perun, who is really, really insane in generally most matchups I found. You just end up in this position where if you oath into Niv Mizzet, you are probably winning the game, because you can any spell that they try to cast, is going to trigger Niv. You're going to draw cards. Any spell you cast is going to draw cards. You can cast, something like Ancestral Recall, draw, 4 cards effectively, and deal 4 damage to something. It's just extremely powerful. And of course, Crystal Brand is your other big one. But then, like, the sideboard cards of, like, Blazing Archon, that sort of thing, are also very big and very important. So I really like this list. It's a lot of fun. I think Dak Faden is a lot better now. And of course, like I said before, Jace is also another card we're trying out. And I think that card's a little bit better now that Narset's restricted. Dak lost a lot of equity in using him as a card advantage engine for your own self, as opposed to using him as a card disadvantage engine for your opponent with Narset. So the decks that you would generally see Narset and Dak together in, they were generally not using Dak to, get ahead of their opponent if their opponent, might have their own Narset. But if they could stick their own Narset and Dak at the same time, you could start using that to, make your opponent discard cards, or you could just use that to get ahead of your opponent. So it's a pretty interesting deck, but I think I'm pretty happy with it so far. It's definitely one of the more interesting glass cannony, plus that can also be a control deck type decks in the format. So we're going to go take a look at some gameplay with this deck, and we'll be back in a short couple seconds. Alright, so we're here with the Oath of Druids list I was talking about with our good friend Oko, Thief of Crowns. So basically, this is kind of the list I've been kind of playing around with. Pretty simple mana base, 15 lands, plus 6 artifact mana in the power 9 pieces, Lotus and the Moxen. We are playing Ancestral Recall. We are playing Time Walk as far as power is concerned. So the only one we're not playing is Time Twister, which is pretty common. Cards like restricted cards like Gitaxian Probe, Mental Misstep, Brainstorm Ponder. We are playing a couple Pyroblast because that card is really, really good. One thing you're going to see a lot of in Oath of Druids list these days is cards like Abrade, cards like Ancient Grudge in the main, Veil of Summer in the main, and then of course Narset, Force of Negations. Force of Negation was another card from Modern Horizons that really gave a lot to this deck because of the fact of being able to protect on their turn what you need to do for next turn. So if you need to like stop them from doing something really really dumb, Force of Negation does it. Otherwise, you can also hardcast Force of Negation on your turn, which is pretty good too. But just having 6 force effects is very very strong for this. So I really like this list. I'm also trying. I meant to pull this out here. I'm going to try out a copy of Chalice of the Void in the sideboard as well. Let me just get to my Chalice here. Let's see here. It's Chain of Vapor. There's Chalice of the Void. All right, we're going to add that to the sideboard. So now we got a copy of Chalice of the Void, the sideboard, and we're going to try that too. So let's go see if we can round up some games. All right, so we are queued up against someone, and hopefully this match goes well. I won the die roll, so that's pretty good. We have a turn 1 Jace here, which is halfway decent, and that's probably where we want to be. Turn 1 Jace, turn 2 Time Walk. Cast us Jace the Mind Sculptor. And we will put back these cards. And they're just going to concede to a turn 1 Jace. We didn't even get to cast Oath of Druids in this game. That's amusing. Okay. Cool. Turn 1 Jace the Mind Sculptor. I'm going to assume that they're on something that can deal with Niv or Gristlebrand, but the Gristlebrand has some utility here. I played against this person earlier in the day, and they were running some sort of Hate Bears list. So Spell Pierce seems pretty bad. They're playing Thoughtseize, so that seems pretty good to have Veil of Summer. Dak seems meh. Obviously, Jace is fine. Probably pull out Ancient Grudge and see where we get from there. Turn 1 Jace. Still pretty good, apparently, in this format. This is a turn 1 Oath of Druids. Which is fantastic. Provided they don't have like a Thoughtseize or something. Oh, I've got a... I could just pitch this Time Walk to it. That seems totally fine. Play this Oath of Druids on turn 1. I never saw any hate like Grafdigger's Cage or anything like that, so I saw anti-hate like Fragmentize, so... You're gonna Source of Plowshares your own dude. Heh. That's kind of funny. Then Wasteland the Forbidden Orchard. Mental Misstep for their Fragmentize. Nature's Claim for any hate. No. Veil of Summer is a card. Cast as Veil of Summer. I mean, these are all cards that are things that if they were running this sort of hate, but it's all sorts of dead cards in this matchup. Quite frankly, just don't want to pull out, too many creatures, or, while Oath is in play, you want to draw something that deals with Oath first. Whereas I want to draw counter magic to stop whatever they have to stop their stuff. So Forbidden Orchard's a card. All right. Choose them. Blazing Archon. 9. My Blazing Archon. No answer to Blazing Archon. All right. Cool. So it just kind of shows what you can do with Oath of Druids in these kind of post-board games. Blazing Archon is a really stellar good card against a lot of these decks that play creatures because they just generally can't swing through it. And you can just generally just clock them with the card. So it's a pretty neat card. I think I misboarded here with bringing in Nature's Claims. That just never presented any sort of thing, but I expected maybe Grafdigger's Cage, that sort of thing. So. So, Misstep, Sapphire, Spell Pierce, Force of Will. We're on the draw, so this is actually not too bad. We could naturally draw an Oath or a Forbidden Orchard. So we also really just kind of want to have action on the draw that stops our opponent from doing stuff. Spell Pierce on the draw is not as great, so it can be pitched to forced. Oh, they're going to unmask me. Ah, this is Dredge. We're going to Spell Pierce, so we're going to Force Will that. They pitched a Dread Return, so that's interesting. So they hit their restricted copy of Grave Troll, Thug, and a Stinkweed Imp. So we can't do much here against that. We have Misstep plus Pyroblast up for some stupidity, but we need to hit an Oath pretty soon. Yeah. Dredge can be particularly gross if your opponent has, just quick action. And that's the only awkward thing about the deck. Sometimes you can just lose to their best draws. They've got like nothing though. They hit like no Narcomoebas. They hit another. Huh. Wow. This does not seem good because they've just kind of hit like no reasonable like action. Yeah, they're gonna have an Icarid next turn. I mean, sure. Like I don't know. Like we kind of just like roll over to this Icarid. We might just be dead here. They can therapy us a bunch. They're gonna have a lot of creatures. But it's always good to see what they can do, and what kind of build they're on. Oh yeah, we're just dead. Hey, Dredge. It's pretty cool. It's a pretty cool deck when it does its thing, though. So I have to admit, like, I do love Dredge for those games where it's like game one, you just like spit my whole board, my graveyard into the play, and then do the thing. So Blazing Archon is a really good card in this matchup. And of course we want our Tormod's Crypts. And we want our Ravenous Traps. And we don't really need Narset in this. Nor do we really need these like Ancient Grudges. Yeah, Braids. Veil of Summer is still pretty good though. So is Pyroblast. The card's still really good here. Oko's still pretty decent. All of our counter magic is really necessary. It's hard to sideboard with this deck with this. Excuse me. Shave an Oko. Probably shave Dak. Dak is not so good if you're running it as a one of. If I cough a little bit or sound scratchy, I'll try not to in the microphone. A little allergy heavy this month. Unfortunately, it's cold up here in Dayton, Ohio, so I would like to play first. Well, this is decent enough. Oh, Leyline of Sanctity. That's cute. That stops our... I didn't bring in Nature's Claims. Haven't seen this out of Dredge, so that's pretty interesting. All right, they're activating. They have a hollow one. Let's see if we can get a time walk off. All right, take an extra turn. All right, let's see if we can try for Jace here. Bounce this hollow one. Yeah, I not have with Leyline of Sanctity not being a thing. There's no way I'm winning this game, unfortunately. Yeah. I miss Cyborg. I should have brought in Nature's Claims, which is unfortunately a thing. All right, so we're queuing up for another match, just to kind of get a third one in the bag for the night, for this recording. So we're on the draw in this game. So we won one, we lost one. This is yet another Dredge matchup. So I feel like I can't keep this hand. This seems okay, though. It's got turn one time walk. Icarita. Or it's just got a turn one Oath of Druids with Brainstorm. Yeah, the Mind Break Trap's fine. Because I'll play Oath. Problem is Cabal therapy, but like you definitely wanna. Feel like if you don't cast Cabal therapy here. Oh, okay. That's cute. Yeah, force me to use the force negation is basically what they're gonna do. And get rid of the time walk. I could just be dead on this next swing though. Like or they've got a force will for it, so Dredge has a lot of force of will action now, unfortunately. That's the name of the game now with this deck, so it's very much harder for Oath to beat now, I think. In fact, I think I just straight want like full Pyroblast, full Spell Pierce, all these cards. Deck. I don't want Jace. I don't want to braid an Ancient Grudge. I cut Gaia's Blessing. Narset's too good though. Like maybe we'll just shave that Power Blast. Like if you can get their yard at least once, Narset becomes really good. This hand doesn't do anything on the play. This hand's even weirder. No. They kept 7, so we milled to 4. We are most certainly losing, unfortunately. Especially if they have a counterspell for this. Oh, no, we get to resolve an Ancestral Recall. I mean, it didn't draw us into much, but Stinkweed up and Prized Amalgams. Ponder. I don't want to draw any of these cards. But Preordain is like the least bad here. Oko, I don't need you right now. Let's not run this into Mindbreak Trap. Yes, that means we have to contend with Bazaar getting activated here, but this is an Archimeebo. That's scary. And Bridges. Triple prized Amalgam. Cabal Therapy plus a Hollow One plus double Icarid. See what they name for. Rest in peace. So, I mean, this is a thing. Four, 7, 10, 13, 15, 7. Yeah, I'm dead. Alright, welcome back to the rest of the video. So, we had some matches that didn't go so well. We played 3 matches, and 2 of those matches were against Dredge. And I misboarded pretty poorly, and I played pretty poorly in them. So it wasn't a really good example of what the deck can do, but we did get to see Blazing Archon in match 1. We didn't get to see anything out of Niv Mizzet or Gristlebrand because we played a turn 1 Jace the Mind Sculptor, as it turns out is still actually pretty good in this format. So and our opponent did not want to deal with that apparently. So but this is a deck that I do like. I'm still learning the deck. I'm gonna start learning something else too fairly soon. There's a deck that I'm probably going to be working on for next month's video, which is this Hollow One Vengevine deck that has been making the rounds on Magic Online thanks to a user by the name of Hanchobai. And so they've been playing this really cool Hollow One Bazaar deck with Basking Root Walla, but it's not survival. It's got Memnites and it's got Squee in it for maximum squeeze to do some, really cool things. So I think it's neat. I think I'm going to be excited to try that out for a little while, put down Oath for a bit, and try something different. It's one of the nice things about being able to try different things is we get to see what different things are like. And I would like to remind everybody that what I do would not be possible if not for the excellent folks over at Card Hoarder. I am not sponsored by any means, but I do use their loan service extensively, and I do really like it. So if you're looking to get into Magic Online, if you're looking to get into a format like Legacy or like Vintage, especially since those formats are pretty cheap on Magic Online, renting sounds kind of weird at first, but once you get into it, it really makes a lot more sense. and you'd be able to build your collection as while you're playing, which is one of the great things about it. You can actually play your deck that you want to build on there if you're going to build something, single. But if you like trying all sorts of different things to find what you like, then renting is really, really great for that. So I definitely recommend it. We're coming close to the end of this video. It's a little bit of a shorter video than last month's video because we had a lot of interview with Greg and everything. But I just want to take a moment. It's great. I've got some good comments on the videos so far from folks. So I really want to take time to thank you guys for watching. Hope you guys are enjoying the content. We're gonna talk a little bit more about Legacy and Vintage this next month after we get into kind of a full month of Legacy, after we do a full month of Vintage under these new restrictions and new bannings, and see where the formats are at and kind of go from there. But anyways, just again, if you would like to support the show, make sure that you go hit the contact information and follow and subscribe over on patreon.com/4xp, twitter.com/4xp. You can also find me on Twitch at twitch.tv/4xp. I'm hopeful to maybe within this next year or so get really more into streaming over there, but for right now it's kind of hard. This is a lot easier for me to work on right now. So, but anyways, thank you guys all for the support. Please make sure to click that subscribe button down below and make sure you click the little bell to, get notified when I post one of these things, which is generally on a monthly basis now. So that's basically how we're going to do it. So on that note, cue the music.